How to one-shot in Warframe. This is something that a lot of people tend to ask in my streams, and it's something I have to answer quite a lot, so I decided to do this video. Shockingly enough, it's a straightforward answer, but there's a lot of nuance to the execution. Pretty much all you have to do is do more damage than the target has health. And people usually ask for what's the best frame or weapon to one-shot, only to realize it's not just the frame or the weapon alone that one-shots. There's something that people completely forget in Warframe, and that is to properly utilize the arsenal. I get it, people want to play one thing and one thing alone. However, there's the Warframe, weapon, arcane focus, and companion synergy that will go a long way if used correctly, because all of those things contribute to your loadout to give you the one-shot potential. TLDR, build around the content you're doing and have the build make sense with what you're using. Because, for example, taking an exterminate setup into a disruption mission just does not make any sense, and some frames perform better with particular loadouts and synergies than others, so use that to your advantage. Now let me head over to a stream segment where I showcase all of this. So again, there's a lot of people. Today we got quite a few people asking, how do we one-shot things? How do you one-shot these enemies, yada yada yada. The simple thing when it comes to one-shotting, just do more damage than the enemy's health. Simple as that. Now, this can work in so many different ways with your guns, blah blah. Right now, I don't have this thing fully buffed. I'm not going to use the helmet, I'm not going to use the tornadoes, but as you can see, when I slam, right, the damage isn't that impressive. It's doing very little damage. But now when we start stacking up our buffs, like for one, we have Arcane Fury. We also have Galvanized Steel for more crit damage. But my weapon also has Arcanes. And I can also add in crit chance. And that completely changed. So these are different ways, and we don't even need the tornadoes. Just showcasing that you can do this without the tornadoes. Simple as that. You'll be one-shotting. Just do more damage than the target has. But then you have to break it down. What did we have to do to get to this level? Number one, the Magistar Incarnate. Let's have a look at it. You get more base damage when you activate Incarnate. You also get more base damage. Increase your slam radius. You get the crits. And when we're building for Slam, we need a few mods. Slam is a unique type of damage with your melee that scales from multiple sources. It scales with combo, it scales with crits, it scales with elemental damage, and also scales with slam damage modifiers. So here we have Seismic Wave. This gives me 200% more slam damage. Notice that I don't have base damage on my weapon here, but I do have it in the form of Killing Blow. This gives me 120% melee base damage. And we'll also have a Riven, but don't mind this. You just replace this for an elemental mod. You'll be just fine. And I'm adding more onto that with melee exposure for more elemental damage. Notice I don't have anything like anything boosting my crits as much except Galvanized Steel. So we stacked up on a lot of crit damage, crit damage, crit damage. Usually if you don't have that, you would run something else. And here more crit damage. And then we also have a companion giving us more crit damage with Tenacious Bond. And now we're missing crits in general. So without the crit buffs from Wrathful Advance, let's get some there we go. We're still one-shotting, but it's not red crits. It's more than enough crits to one-shot these enemies because we're dealing way more damage than they have health. You get what I'm saying? And because I'm outsourcing my crits to Wrathful Advance, I don't have to worry about modding for crit on my weapon. Crit chance, that is. Now, what do we learn from this setup? We're not only depending on the weapon alone. We're depending on the weapon, Warframe, and helmet synergy. The reason why Zephyr is used here for this particular slam build because of her Tornado and Funnel Clouds. Tornadoes give more crit damage. with the elemental stacking and all that. And Funnel Clouds allows you to do more damage. And then Wrathful Advance gives you crit chance. Simple as that. That's it. That's all you have to know. It gives you crit chance. And all of the other damage modifiers are on the weapon. So we're scaling our damage from several sources. Not only that, the Zephyr build has even more things, like Nira's Hatred. When Omniforma comes out, we're going to change Augur Secrets out for the other Nira mod. We're going to add more strength from other sources. Again, Fury for base damage. So we're doing all of these things to stack up, allowing us to one-shot. Now, this same concept, it can be applied on someone like Kullervo. Where the heck Kullervo at? Now, Kullervo has the original Wrathful Advance. Again, we don't need to mod for crit anymore. At the same time, we can add more elemental damage with Nourish. And we also have Fury here. He's got the 2 Nira mods to increase my slam damage. But at the same time, he's doing the same thing with his Collective Curse. This allows you to redistribute all of that damage with one hit, basically giving your Magistar Giga range. And he can take full advantage of the maximum combo because he can easily build combo with his second ability. Right there, we got 2 times combo, as you can see. All right? It's a lot of damage. The thing is, you don't even see the actual number because they all get one shot immediately. Similar concept, and we're just nuking enemies. Now, that's just with slam builds. This is just a synergy thing. You can do this with any weapon. Not every weapon can one-shot, unfortunately, but in a general sense, you can do this with any weapon. Like, my favorite example is using Saren with Exceltra. Earlier, as I was talking about Exceltra is not a great weapon, right? This is not a weapon you would use by itself. It needs the buffs. Now, for this particular Saren build, I'm buffing my weapons to do more damage. We have elemental damage with the purple shards. We have Venom Dose for corrosive damage. And we have Toxic Lash for toxin damage. For those who don't know, Toxic Lash scales from strength, elemental damage, percentage of your weapon's damage, and faction damage. So having a lot of elemental damage will contribute to Toxic Lash, giving you more damage, to then giving the weapon more damage, so the weapon can give Toxic Lash more damage, so the weapon can deal more damage. And then Roar gives the weapon damage, so then Toxic Lash can deal more damage, so then Toxic Lash can buff the weapon to deal more damage, but with Roar. Did you get that? So it's a nice loop, aka a lot of damage, exactly. So now everybody who is looking at this, they're like, hey, you have electricity on your weapon. And when you look at the build has no electricity mod. And then this build looks kind of funny. I'm not using a base damage arcane, but I'm using primary blight. We get more crit damage and multi-shot when you trigger the toxin status effect. Easily done with Toxic Lash because boom, it's a guaranteed hit. Base damage, that will multiply all of my damage. Elemental damage. If I had another forma, I'll definitely go with Prime Cryo Rounds. That's going to be Giga damage. All of this will contribute to adding more damage to my build. Here, it's viral because I already have corrosive from Venom Dose. And it has electric, so I'm dealing viral electric from this weapon itself. And I also get corrosive. So, shooting the weapon normally. As you can see, viral electricity. And the weapon, we're eating more ammo. And we're not triggering our arcane. So it doesn't look that impressive. So we're going to go step by step. Number 1, we'll start off with Toxic Lash. This way, I get additional elemental damage, and it triggers my arcane. You see over here, we got Blight. 40 stacks already, and some enemies are dying. And that already increased our damage. Not by a substantial amount, but a pretty decent amount. Any regular enemy will be dead. These guys are like mini elites. Now let's add more elemental damage to then buff Toxic Lash. And also buff our weapon. Less shots and the enemy is dead. Simple. We almost killed everything. Now let's add more damage to that by increasing our faction multiplier. Less shots, and we're getting better kills. That's the one thing you have to know, guys. Your weapon by itself isn't as good. Even though it's a really good weapon, it's always made better when you do weapon and Warframe synergy. Combine the two. This is why you have the arsenal. Use your arsenal. As long as you understand the basic fundamentals of modding, you will understand that when you add two things together, they will do more damage. 2 is better than 1. The big 3 when it comes to damage. Does anybody in chat know the big 3 when it comes to damage? Let's see if people still remember. So the big 3 when it comes to damage. Base damage, elemental damage, and critical damage. These 3 are the 3 horsemen of big damage. Not just crit, it's crit damage. Let's go to the weapon test dummy just to show you this. We love showing this on the Soma, right? This crit damage here is from our Tenacious Bond, don't worry. Base 100% value. This is our total damage. It's 22. What happens when we add an elemental damage mod? Boom. We get a new value to our damage, and that's why our total damage goes up, because it now has a new value. It didn't increase all of the damage that we're going to be dealing with Impact Puncture Slash, but it just gave us a new value, giving us more damage overall. Now, when we add base damage, it will multiply the 100% value of our total damage, including the element and the physical damage types. As you can see, more things went green, and we have 110 total damage. If I remove elemental damage, it's a lot less, 58. Look how much that increased. Now, if we're to add the same multiplier, which is heavy caliber, 165 versus 90, you would expect, 165 and 165 will give you way more than 165 and 90. Well, no. This is 94 total damage, while the other one was 110, because these two are the same multiplier, meaning they are additive to each other. So you add these, and then you multiply the base 100% value. While this one gives you an entire new value to then be multiplied by your base damage multiplier, thus giving you a larger total damage. So this is why you always want to add elemental damage. It increases your total damage. Now, the other factor to increasing your damage is critical damage. When we add Vital Sense, notice, boom, our crit damage went up. It's another green number. So critical damage only functions if you have crit chance, because this will multiply your total damage when you crit. So I have a 30% crit chance. That means 30% of the time we are multiplying this damage by 6.6 times. That's how it works. This is why these 3 are the big 3. So you always want to focus on these when you're building a hybrid weapon. And even a crit weapon, you don't have to worry about adding any status chance, because you're dealing raw damage. This is why running Weeping Wounds on a corrosive Korra build doesn't make sense, because if you're building to one-shot, why would you proc a status effect? Same thing when it comes to Warframes like Mesa. She has currently, we're not sure about the changes, but when you go to Mesa, building her for a status regulator is pretty dumb, because why tickle enemies while you can just one-shot them? Build to do damage, and also know who you're building against. If you're not fighting against Grenier, you build a different way. Corpus have shields and health, so you build for Toxin, you completely ignore their shields, because just one-shot their health, because Toxin goes right through shields. So building for corrosive all the time, yes, it can be done at lower levels, but once you get to certain levels in the game, building accordingly is going to help you one-shot enemies. Saranta, really good against Corpus. Melee influence, also pretty good against pretty much anything because it's AoE electricity and it scales really well. But if you want, you know, an instant one-shot on Corpus units, Saranta is going to be better. The reason why Saranta is better than the Glaive against Corpus is because it has innate toxin and a guaranteed toxin proc. Bleeds are not good against shields. They're pretty good against armored units, but again, Saranta will just one-shot Corpus like nothing. This is like the best Corpus weapon. Sorry, the best weapon to use against Corpus. Even if you have a magnetic Kuva weapon, you still build... Exactly, absolutely. Just one-shot. So this is the whole concept about one-shotting enemies. Know your enemy's weaknesses, build accordingly, and you can also have debuffs. People forget about debuffs. There's several different types of debuffs that you can have in the game. Number one, the most obvious one, is armor stripping. Who's an enemy that's weak to corrosive? Grenier. There we go. So if you do your scanner, you can see they're weak to corrosive. The whole faction, even if you armor strip them. Right, we're doing pretty decent damage because these guys are weak to corrosive. Now, if I were to take armor strip, let's go and do Unairu. We're definitely dealing more damage because, for one, we completely removed their armor. But you don't necessarily have to fully strip their armor to do any of this. Depending on what weapon you build, you can just completely one-shot them regardless of their defenses. So that's one way. Debuffs. This is pretty good against enemies with damage reduction, like, what do you call it? Demolishers. Who has damage vulnerability that's most common? Banshee, Mag, Caliban. If I can find Caliban, okay, whatever. But Caliban, Neja with a second ability, Equinox with her 2, true. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. You can stack all of these debuffs plus your one-shot setup, and you can definitely do more damage. So, for example, if we go back to the Zephyr one-shot, Nova, true, Nova. Right, it's still a one-shot against these Xmas units. Still a lot of damage. You get what I'm saying? So now, what if we add a debuff to that by proccing Viral? Her tornadoes are really strong, guys. Alright, her tornadoes are really strong. Oh, hold on. I keep on forgetting how busted her tornadoes are. Let's put them on the tractor cannon. Alright, so if I prime them, right? Now they have all of these debuffs. That's way more damage than I did without priming when I had the tornadoes. So, there you go. You see the difference? So now, what if I prime them? Tornadoes. We did 246 million and probably even more. I didn't even see that. Do you see how we went from 13, 17 million all the way up to 200 million in damage? And that's against Xmas units. Combining all of these things together will, of course, give you more damage. So again, prime. All right, they're all debuffed. Tornadoes. We were still one-shotting them with 13, 17 million because they don't have that much health. But this is, of course, excessive amounts of damage, which is a lot more satisfying. But still, a one-shot. That's what I'm saying. When you combine different ways and use synergy and understanding your enemy's weaknesses, that's how you're going to achieve these one-shots. So yeah, boys. Hopefully that helped you out. Hopefully you understand the concept. This is not like, oh, this will work on every build. Certain builds are just not good for the content that you're trying to do. Guys, there is no one build works everywhere. It always depends on the setup. Please learn this. There is no copy paste one build works everywhere. Depends on the setup. When will people understand this?